Japan is one of the safest countries on Earth, not just by reputation, by numbers. Gun violence is so rare that entire years pass with fewer than 10 shootings across a nation of 125 million people. Ownership is heavily restricted. Obtaining a firearm is a months-long process of background checks, mental health evaluations, and government inspections of your home. Most people never see a gun in their lifetime outside a police officer's holster. So when, on the afternoon of May 25th, 2023, emergency calls began flooding into the Nakano City police station in Nagano Prefecture, reporting a man with a knife chasing a woman in the street, the officers who responded had no reason to think they would need body armor. Both of them would be dead before the next sunrise. And the man who killed them had never broken the law to get his weapons. He had followed every rule. The licenses were all in order. This is the story of the 2023 Nakano City shooting. It was a Thursday afternoon, quiet by any measure. Two women, Yuki Murakami, 66, and Yasuko Takeuchi, 70, were out walking in a residential neighborhood in Nakano City, a small city of around 40,000 people nestled in the hill country of Nagano Prefecture. They were local women. Neighbors. It was the kind of walk people take in such places every single day. At around 4:25 in the afternoon, a man appeared. He was dressed in camouflage clothing. He had a knife. He chased Yuki Murakami and stabbed her. He then attacked Yasuko Takeuchi. Both women suffered serious injuries. Both would die from their wounds. Emergency calls went out. Officers responded, among them Sergeant Takuo Ikeuchi, 61, and Inspector Yoshiki Tamai, 46, from the Nakano police station. Neither was wearing a bulletproof vest. Neither was expecting to face a firearms threat. What they'd been told was that a man with a knife had attacked some women. That is a serious situation, but in Japan it is not unusual. A hunting rifle was not part of what anyone imagined, but the man waiting for them had one. He opened fire. Sergeant Ikuchi was shot in the chest. Inspector Tamai was shot and stabbed. Both officers were killed. The attacker was Masanori Aoki, 31, a local farmer. After killing the officers, he retreated to a building nearby, a house that belonged to his father, Masamichi Aoki, the chairman of the Nakano City Council, and barricaded himself inside with the rifle. A large-scale police response sealed off the area. Negotiators were brought in. During the standoff, two relatives of Aoki managed to slip out of the building. Aoki himself refused to come out. He stayed inside for approximately 12 hours. At around 4:37 in the morning, on May 26th, Aoki finally surrendered. He was taken into custody without further violence. By then, 4 people were dead. To understand how this happened, you have to understand Japan's firearms laws. Because in most countries, a man like Aoki would not have had access to weapons at all. In Japan, he had them legally, and he had several. Under Japan's firearms and swords control law, private individuals can obtain hunting rifles and airguns for specific licensed purposes, primarily hunting and pest control in agricultural settings. The process is not casual. An applicant must pass a written examination, undergo a psychological evaluation, and submit to a police inspection of their home, including how the weapons are stored. Licenses must be renewed every 3 years. A single criminal conviction or a diagnosis of certain mental illnesses disqualifies an applicant permanently. Masanori Aoki had passed all of it. He was a licensed farmer who worked agricultural land in the Nagano area. He also ran a small gelato shop called Gelateria Frutti in the nearby resort town of Karuizawa, making ice cream from fruit he grew himself. For his farming operations, he used firearms to deter wild boar and deer from destroying his crops, a common and legally recognized use in Japan's rural prefectures. He held licenses for 4 firearms, including at least 1 shotgun. He had the weapons, he had the ammunition, he had the means. What he also had, according to the prosecution, was a growing and dangerous fixation on his neighbors. The motive that emerged during the investigation was rooted in what investigators described as delusional thinking. Aoki had become convinced that the 2 women, Murakami and Takeuchi, were spreading harmful things about him in the community. talking about him behind his back, working against his reputation. It is worth being clear that this is not a confirmed psychological fact. The prosecution presented it as the motive Aoki acted on, and the defense offered a different account of his mental state, which we'll examine in a moment. But the sequence of events on that afternoon was deliberate. He put on camouflage, he selected a knife and a rifle. He went to the area where the women would be walking. He attacked them first. Then, when police arrived, he was ready for them too. This was not a spontaneous break with reality that erupted from nowhere. The preparation, the clothing, the weapons selection, the timing, points to a plan that had been forming. Whether that plan came from delusion or from something colder was a question the court would spend years trying to answer. Masanori Aoki grew up in a family with a certain kind of local standing. His father, Masamichi Aoki, was a publicly elected official, a visible, respected figure in their community. It's said that Masanori had been a bright and socially active young person through his school years, described by people who knew him as outgoing and energetic. Something changed when he went to university in Tokyo. By multiple accounts, he withdrew. He stopped keeping regular contact with his old social circle. He eventually returned to Nagano and turned to farming and the gelato business. From the outside, it looked like a quiet, self-sufficient life. He wasn't someone who would have stood out to neighbors as troubled. But the neighbors he attacked, Murakami and Takeuchi, seemed to have had no actual conflict with him. There is no established incident on record, no documented argument, no complaint filed. People who knew the two women described them as ordinary local residents who had no quarrel with Aoki. Whatever had convinced him that they were out to get him appears to have been constructed entirely inside his own mind, which is the particular tragedy at the heart of this kind of motive. The person who becomes the target of persecutory thinking may have no idea they are a target at all. From the outside, from the target's perspective, it's just another afternoon walk. From inside the person who has decided they are the enemy, it is something else entirely. And then there is the ambush of the police officers, which adds a layer that demands explanation. When your mind has become convinced that the world is arrayed against you, that people you know are actively working to harm you, and that you have no option left but to fight back, the arrival of uniformed authority may not register as neutral intervention. It can become, in that distorted frame, an extension of the threat. This is interpretive analysis. It is not a clinical diagnosis. But it is one framework for understanding why Aoki did not run, why he waited, why, when the officers came to respond to what he had just done to his neighbors, he was ready. At trial, the defense built its case around a central argument, that Masanori Aoki had schizophrenia and that the illness had so severely impaired his judgment that he could not be held fully responsible for his actions in the way Japan's death penalty requires. The defense asked the court to return a sentence of life imprisonment rather than death. The prosecution rejected this framing. Their argument was that Aoki may have shown signs of mental disturbance, but that he retained sufficient capacity to understand what he was doing and to control his behavior. They pointed to the preparation, the deliberate choice to dress in camouflage, the selection of both a knife and a firearm, the sequencing of victims, the subsequent barricade, as evidence of purposeful, organized action. A man acting in a pure psychotic break, they argued, does not lay this kind of groundwork. This is one of the hardest arguments in criminal law to resolve. Most people understand intuitively that severe mental illness can distort reality in ways that defy ordinary comprehension. Most people also understand intuitively that a person who prepares for an attack over what appears to have been an extended period of time is not the same as someone in the grip of an acute, spontaneous breakdown. Where Aoki fell on that spectrum, and whether that position affected his criminal responsibility, is a question on which even trained evaluators disagreed. What is not in dispute is the pattern of deterioration. A person who comes to believe, without any factual basis, that the women on his street are conspiring against him. Who begins to carry this belief inward and inward until it becomes, in his mind, an established threat that requires a violent response? Who arms himself accordingly? Who, at the moment he decides to act, does so against not just the people he believes wronged him, but against the officers sent to stop him, as if their intervention too were part of the persecution. Whether that constitutes schizophrenia in the clinical sense is a question for psychiatrists. What it illustrates, more broadly, is the way in which persecutory delusion, if that is what it was, does not announce itself from the outside. Aoki had passed every required mental health check. He had been cleared, he had licenses, and yet something had been building inside him that none of those systems were designed to see. The Nagano District Court, presided over by a panel of professional judges and lay judges, rejected the defense's argument. The court found that Aoki's mental state did not reduce his criminal responsibility to the degree that would preclude the death penalty. On October 14, 2025, he was sentenced to death. Aoki subsequently appealed the sentence, and as of the time of this recording, that appeal remains ongoing. Japan's firearms laws are among the most restrictive in the world, and by nearly every metric, they work. The country's gun death rate is extraordinarily low compared to virtually every other nation. The framework that exists, the written tests, the psychological evaluations, the home inspections, the storage rules, the 3-year renewal cycle, is a genuine attempt to keep weapons out of the hands of people who would misuse them. But the Nakano case sits uncomfortably alongside that framework, because Masanori Aoki had done everything the system asked of him. He passed the tests, he submitted to the inspections, his licenses were current, the state had examined him and concluded he was fit to own firearms. And on a Thursday afternoon in May 2023, he took those legally owned weapons and used them to kill 4 people. There is no clean lesson in that. You cannot design a system that catches every case, because you cannot look inside every person's mind as it changes over time. But you can sit with what the case leaves behind. Sergeant Ikuchi and Inspector Tamai were responding to what looked, from the outside, like a knife call. Nobody had flagged Aoki. Nobody had any reason to believe there was a rifle waiting for them. They arrived without bulletproof vests because nothing in the information they'd been given suggested they'd need them. They did their job the way they were supposed to do it. They never got to go home that evening. The 2 women, Murakami and Takeuchi, were simply walking. They had no reason to believe they were in danger from anyone. They almost certainly had no idea that the man who lived near them had built in his own mind a case against them that was leading somewhere like this. What do you do with that? What do you do with the knowledge that ordinary afternoons can end this way? That systems designed to protect can miss what is coming? That the people who try to stop the harm can become part of it? I don't have an easy answer to that. I'm not sure anyone does. But I think it matters to know these stories, to understand not just that these things happened, but how and why. Because that understanding, difficult as it is the beginning of any meaningful response. Thanks for watching. If this channel is finding its way to you, please subscribe and stick around. There's more to come.